Thank you. The Environmental Finance Center is dedicated to enhancing the ability of governments and other organizations to provide environmental programs and services in ways that are fair, effective, and financially sustainable. We do this in a variety of ways, such as through applied research, program design and evaluation, and teaching and outreach like this webinar. We have an informal saying here that how you pay for it matters. We work obviously with water and wastewater finance, but in other environmental media too, such as energy, solid waste, and stormwater. This webinar is sponsored by the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, and we are very grateful to Mr. Aubrey White, Ms. Samantha Sims, Mr. Dennis Harrison, and many others at ADEM for their active support and funding of this project. The webinar is an outgrowth of the 2014 Drinking Water and Wastewater Rate Survey of Alabama Utilities conducted by ADEM, who collected the rate sheets and the audited annual financial reports, and the Environmental Finance Center, who entered the data into a database, and then we developed an online interactive dashboard tool, or rates dashboard, from the survey data. While ADEM sponsored the survey work and also this webinar series, as well as a summary report and rates tables that are on our website, the dashboard itself was paid for by the U.S. EPA through the ongoing Smart Management for Small Water Systems project. And we'll have more about that project later on in the webinar because it may be very interesting to those of you who are small systems serving 10,000 or fewer people. The rate survey, we did manage to get over 450 utilities responding, water and or wastewater utilities, and we do encourage you to go to our website. As for our good sponsors at ADEM, we want to make sure that those of you who are systems are aware of potential funding assistance available through the SRF or the State Revolving Fund section there. And you'll see the contact information on your screen there for the head of that section, Mr. James Daly. Speaking of the webinar series, today's webinar represents the third out of 4 topics in the series. Today, rate setting using the water and sewer rates analysis model. And this webinar, like the next topic where we'll be doing on September 23rd and 25th, capital planning and the user-friendly capital improvement tool for water and wastewater utilities. These webinars are available to you at no charge thanks to ADEM. You can register for the upcoming topic through that link you see on your screen there. And as I said before, all of these slides will be emailed out to you shortly if you don't have time to jot down the link now. ADEM has approved for water system operators 1 CEH hour per topic here under the category of utility management and finance. And we really do encourage you to come to our Capital Improvement Tool webinar, which is a great Excel-based tool you'll be hearing more about later. And now I want to introduce my colleague, Shadi Eskoff, who will be telling us all about the water and sewer rates analysis model. Shadi Eskoff is a senior project director here at the EFC, has worked here for years on water and wastewater finance issues, developed this tool that you'll be hearing about today, also works with us on many other projects, including the Small Systems Project, and it's my pleasure to introduce Shadi.
Thank you, David, and thank you everybody for being on the webinar with us. So this is a tool that's available for utilities and consultants or anybody who works with utilities to download for free and to use in deciding rates for the utilities. It was funded partly by EPA and partly by the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources, so we thank them for the funds that provided the opportunity to create this tool. But we keep updating this tool over time. So right now we're on version 2.7. I always recommend people who download this tool to keep checking on our website once in a while, maybe once every few months, because there may be some updated versions of the tool that have either we just fixed some bugs or we added some more flexibility and some more capability to the tool as well. This is a tool that runs off of Excel, and there are no macros. There's no simulations. It's meant to be as simple as possible so that a utility will be able to use this tool within a few hours and come up with a broad assessment of what the rates should be in order to achieve their goals. And I wanted to bring up the point of broad assessment because this is not going to be a tool that you can use to as the only thing that you use to set the rates for your utility. This is a very good tool to quickly assess how much of a shortfall you'll have on your revenues if you don't raise your rates or if you don't change your rates, and then what happens when you do change your rates, what ballpark revenues will you be getting compared to your expenses, and do you need to adjust them, adjust your rate structure. Before I get too carried away with the tool, I have a couple of poll questions that David will pull up right now just to know who's in the audience and what level of expertise we have right now. So the first question is, are you directly involved in calculating, reviewing, or setting water and wastewater rates for your utility as a consultant, or you're learning about it right now? So you just want to know who's in the audience and what your level of interest is in this webinar. And we'll give you just a few more seconds. I'm curious to see if anybody here is on their first day. This will be a very interesting webinar for a first day. Okay, I think we're good. David will share those results. So we actually have a mix. There are some who don't set rates, don't review rates. Hopefully you're here to learn a little bit about rate setting in general and learn about the tool. But for everybody else who have experience, you'll know, when I talk about base charges of volumetric rates, you'll know what I'm talking about. For others, if I talk about something and you're unfamiliar with some of those terms, please feel free to use the questions box and ask me to clarify. And David will stop me and ask me to make sure that I address that question. Thank you for that. We'll have the next poll question come up. So for those of you who do review rates, if you don't review rates, you don't have to answer this question, but those of you that do review rates, what do you use when you're reviewing them? Do you just do in-house analysis and projections of your finances? Do you use consultants to help you with that? Do you have a rate model? Do you have some kind of a calculator or rate model that you just plug in numbers and it will spit out what the rates should be for you? Do you have rates that are tied to an index or a multi-year approved plan? You can check all that apply in this one. It's not one or the other. And if you don't use anything at all, then if you can also submit in the questions box, just let us know what you do use. We'd be curious to hear about your experiences. Okay, I think we got just about enough answers. That's good. It's a mix of results again. So we have a lot of people using in-house analysis and or consultants. There are a few that are using in-house rate models. And some of you have rates tied to an index, so you don't necessarily have to do a lot of projection, or as much analysis as you would otherwise. But those of you that have an in-house rate model, if you don't mind, if you can just in the questions box let us know if this is a purely in-house that you developed yourself, or this was a rate model that somebody else, some external agency developed. If it has a brand name or something like that, just let us know what those are and submit them. We can use that information when we look at our rate model and see if we can adjust in some way. We don't want to have a rate model that's duplicative of other rate models. We want to have something that's available that can either supplement or complement some other work. Thank you, David. In doing the rates analysis, the rate survey in the state of Alabama, we've noticed that a lot of utilities are very active in reviewing and adjusting their rates from one year to the next. So we've seen that, and this is an excerpt from the report that came out of the Alabama rate survey, which you can download off of our website. Here's the long link. By the way, we will be sharing the PowerPoint slides and the video recording of this webinar with you so that you don't have to try to write down this link right there. But on page 12 of the report, we show that in in March of 2014, when we did the survey, about 47% of the utilities had raised rates in 2013, and another 28% raised rates in 2014 as well. So the majority of the utilities had raised rates in the last year or two, which is actually pretty common practice throughout the Southeast. We know in North Carolina and in Georgia, the percentages look very similar to this. It's not always the case. In other parts of the country, we see that utilities tend to hold on to their rates for a lot longer, and there are different reasons for that. But it's common to see that utilities are raising rates pretty frequently, and that's what's happening in Alabama. So the objectives of this webinar is to introduce the EFC's water and sewer rates analysis model, demonstrate how to use it. And after that, if we have some time, I can talk a little bit about some of the other resources available on rate setting that you may be able to download and use in setting your own rates, and also answer questions about the tool or rate setting in general. So this brings up a point that if you have questions about rate setting and not specifically about the tool, please feel free to ask those questions too. David is monitoring the questions box, and if there are times that he might interject and ask those questions, or we'll just queue the questions for the end of the webinar and answer them. And if we miss them, then we will be emailing you directly afterwards. So what this tool does is essentially it will forecast the end-of-year fund balance for the next 20 years based on what your rates are, based on what your water use patterns are, and based on what your expenses are for your system. And those are the data inputs that you'll need. You need to know what your rates are, what your rates will be, or what your scenario building your rates to be, what your customer water use patterns are, and what your expenses will be. And the bottom line is it will look at what your starting fund balance is. It will add on the revenues that's being projected from the rates and the water use patterns. It will subtract out the expenses. It will calculate what the end-of-year fund balance is. And then it will go to the next year and continue the projections from there. On the rate structure side and the rate input side, you will have the option to enter in different sorts of rate structures. You can enter in flat charges. If you just charge $25 a month, regardless of water use, you can enter that in. You can enter in uniform rates. Sometimes you call those flat rates, where it's $2 per 1,000 gallons for all consumption, or any type of block rates as well, increasing block rates, decreasing block rates that fluctuate up and down. So the vast majority of the typical types of rate structures you can use in this model. We have space in the model available for looking at water rates, sewer rates, and irrigation, residential irrigation rates, and also for residential and commercial rates. It doesn't have to be residential, commercial. It could be that if you just have two big or two major rate structure customer classes, then you can use those columns for that. You can have the residential section and non-residential sections. If you don't have commercial but you have industrial rates, you can put it in your industrial rates instead. The next thing that you would enter is the second rate structure. So you would be comparing two rate structures side by side. So you look at your existing rates, and then you'll see what the projections are on your revenues using existing rates. And then you can enter in the second column of new rates, and you can see how, if you're increasing your fund balance that way. And then you can use the second column to play with scenarios. You can start off with some numbers, see what the projections are, and then tweak those numbers until you get to a level that you are targeting and you're comfortable with. On the expenses side, there's data inputs for two types of expenses. On the right-hand side, you'll see expenses that you know for certain will happen every single year. So if you know, for example, your debt service in each year, or if you know that 2 years down the line, there's going to be a capital project that you're paying $1 million in cash for that project, then you would use the data inputs on that right-hand side to put in very specific numbers for specific years. And the model will take those numbers as is. It won't adjust them by any inflation factor. It will, whatever you put down in that cell, the model will assume that's what you'll be paying in nominal terms in that year. On the left-hand side, we also have inputs for expenses that you might know or you might be able to track right now, but you can't really predict accurately in the future. So what the model will do is it will take these numbers and then it will linearly extrapolate or inflate those expenses every single year above that. And I'll explain a little bit more detail when I pull up the tool and actually demonstrate how you can use it. On the customer water use side, this is a section that might take the longest amount of time for data input or just the data gathering portion of it. You'll need to enter in the water use, the average monthly water use by block size if you have a block rate structure. So a couple of slides ago when we said that you can enter in different blocks and different rates for different blocks, well, in here you'd have to show what the volumes were that you sold in each different block so that the model can project what the revenues are coming out of those block rates. There are also some simple assumptions built into the model regarding price elasticity, or basically how customers will react when you adjust rates. So we know from a lot of studies, including some of our own, that customers do react to price increases. Every time utility raises price, customers will reduce their average consumption by some amount. How much really depends on that customer and also depends on where in the country you are. Down here in the southeast, we see a rule of thumb is for every 10% increase on rates, customers will reduce about 2 to 3% of their average household use. That's on the residential side. Commercial side is a lot harder to predict what that reaction is. Sometimes there's no reaction. Sometimes it's a major reaction where they just they install their own well instead of connecting to the water system. So I mentioned earlier this is a simple tool. We try to keep it as simple as possible so that it doesn't take a lot of time. And we know that this is not going to be a tool that you'll use as the only thing to set your rate. But it's a good tool to give you a broad brush assessment of what your rates ought to be in order to have enough revenues to meet your expenses, your projected expenses. Some of the limitations of having a simple tool include the options and the assumptions they're included. You can adjust those, but you can't add any more assumptions or complexity to the model than what's already permitted. Having said that, if you do use this tool and you want to customize it in some way for your utility, let's say you've got base charges by meter size, or you've got seasonal rates, or you've got more than 5 blocks, and this tool doesn't fit what your needs are, then feel free to contact us, and we'll be able to customize the tool for your utility and add some of that complexity, especially if you're a small water system serving fewer than 10,000 people. And that's actually how we created this tool. We were working with the small systems on EPA projects, and we provide direct assistance to them to assess their rates, and we use this tool constantly to communicate with the managers, the finance directors, and then the board later on setting the rates. The other limitation on this tool is that we only project, well, we project 20 years of cash flow, but you only project those 20 years based on one change on the rates. So the model will look at existing rates, will look at new rates, which will apply next year, and then it will assume that you maintain those new rates for the next 20 years. We did this by design because we want utilities to be using this tool not just once and then setting rates for the next 5 years. We want utilities to be using this tool every single year. So you would use this tool, adjust your rates for next year, make an assessment of what your revenues and expenses will look like, and then come back to the next year and update the analysis. And we have warning messages in the tool itself that basically says the same thing. And also just a reminder that this is a tool that's not a substitute for a more detailed rate study. You still need to fine-tune the analysis after going through this model. I'll be downloading the tool in a second, but just let you know that the first time that you download the tool off of the website, just like when you download anything off the website, when you open up in Excel, it will give you this yellow warning message at the top says you've downloaded something off the web. Do you want to enable editing? You have to click that yellow button in order to use the tool. But once you click it once, then you should be good for the rest of the time. So now I will demonstrate how you can download the tool off of our website. essentially it's just going to our web page and going under resources, tools, and then looking under searching for the water and sewer rates analysis model. I also wanted to bring up this section here. If you go under programs, drinking water and wastewater, Alabama water and wastewater rates and rate structures, that's where we have the reports, the rates tables, and the rates dashboard that were created for the state of Alabama using the survey that ADEM and the EFC put together in the past few months. All right, so I'm going to switch over to the web real quick. Quick demo again. So this is our website, efc.sog.unc.edu. You go under Resources. You click on Resources Tools. Click on the Tools section. And then you scroll down. There are a lot of tools here that are available for you to download and use. Everything on our website is free to use. And you would find the water and sewer rates analysis model. You click that. And then the file is right here. So once you click this, it will ask to download the file, and then you hit OK on that. I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going to click on this and wait for it. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the tool. As a reminder before I move on, if you have any questions on rate setting in general or on the tool, please submit them at any time. So the tool starts off with the instructions page, and you can see down here we've got different worksheets. The data inputs are in green, and the charts, the final results are is that charts tab in yellow. Everything else down here, I might not have time to go over everything, but these are where all the calculations happen, so you can go in and look at them, but you can't actually change anything in these worksheets, the ones that don't have any color on them. So let's go back to the instructions. The instructions point out that everything that you see that's in a dark green cell and white lettering or white numbering, those are your data inputs. We've protected this worksheet or this spreadsheet so that you can't edit anything outside of those green cells. And that's just to make sure that the formulas are protected and don't get adjusted by mistake. There are some hyperlinks that can help you jump from one page to the other. So I just jumped into data input 1. I'm going to zoom in a little bit to give you a little bit more of a better view. So the first input that you would change would be the fiscal year. And under existing rates, what is the fiscal year that you're analyzing? For this one, I do want to point out that this fiscal year under existing rates is going to be applied not just for the rates, but also when you're looking at the expenses side and also on the water use side. So we want quote-unquote existing rates or existing year to be a year that you can either very accurately project what your expenses and your water use patterns will be, or what they were. So sometimes it actually makes sense to use last year's numbers as the existing, quote-unquote existing, and then adjust the following year to be the new rate structure that you want to put in. So you would change it to the existing or the existing fiscal year to any number, and automatically all the graphs and charts will pick up that number and update to what you've just entered. We have the residential rate structures box, then we have the commercial rate structures box, and we have the irrigation meters. And on the irrigation side, there's no sewer section. So you'll see water, sewer, water, sewer, water only for the irrigation. Again, if you don't have commercial rates, but you have an industrial rate structure or multifamily or something else, then you can just ignore the term commercial and just put in whatever applies. This tool doesn't really care what you call things. It's just looking for the numbers to calculate what that end of year fund balance is. The base rate or the base charge, one of the limitations that we have right now for the tool is that you can only enter in one. So on the residential rate structures, usually the 5/8 inch meter or the 3/4 inch meter, whichever one is more prevalent, you would put that in. On the commercial side, you might want to put in the one that generates the most revenue for you, or the most number of commercial customers pay this specific base charge. Use that one for the model. We hope that a future version of this tool will give you more flexibility and you can add in more information as well. So you start off with the base charge. If you include a consumption allowance with the base charge, let's say that $16 includes 2,000 gallons, then you would put in the first block start here as 2,000 gallons. That way the model knows that these rates down here do not apply except beyond the first 2,000. This tool does use only gallons as opposed to CCFs or acre feet or anything else that might be used by utilities. But if you do use cubic feet, then we have a calculator down here that can help you translate your numbers, your rate structure numbers, into numbers that you need to input into this tool. So let's say that your $16 includes the first 200 cubic feet. Well, the first 200 cubic feet is 1,496 gallons. So you would go down here and type in 1,496. So the calculator shows you what those numbers are for you. We have space for 5 different blocks. So block 1 would be, in this case, it's 1,496 to 3,000 gallons. And then it says from 3,001 to 8,000 gallons, and then above 8,000. So you can have up to 5. You don't have to have 5. You can have up to 5. If you only have 2 blocks, let's say 0 to, let's go from 0 to 5,000 gallons, and then anything above 5,000 different block rates, then you would enter in 0 to 5,000, everything above 5. This is what the block rate is, and this is what the block rate is for above 5,000. I'm going to undo this so I can show 3 examples instead. On this side, this is where you put in the volumetric rate. So it's dollars per 1,000 gallons. Again, if you have dollars per 100 cubic feet, you can just type in your numbers up here. Let's say you've got $2 per 100 cubic foot. Whoops. $2 per 100 cubic foot is $2.67 per 1,000 gallons. So you would go in here and put $2.67 per 1,000. Switch it back to 2. If you have uniform rates, so only one rate structure, only one volumetric rate for all consumption, you can zero out these numbers here and just have everything above your consumption allowance at $2 per 1,000. If you have blocks, then these blocks, you cannot enter in a number here that's larger than this number here. Actually, you can, but it's not going to work well with the model later on. I'm going to switch this to 3,000, which is the way that we have the default. You'll notice that at the beginning when the default of this tool is that you'll see that the block rates here are all the same. $2 per 1,000, $2 per 1,000, $2 per 1,000. What we're trying to show here is that you can use this tool to switch from a uniform rate structure to an increasing block rate structure and see what the effects are. So in this case, under the existing year, the utility was just having a uniform rate structure that's $2 per 1,000 gallons for every block. But they were trying to model an increasing block rate structure for the next year, for 2015. They're raising the rate, the base charge by $4, and then they're lowering the first block. So between 0 and 3,000, they're going to lower it to $1.75. They're going to increase the rate from 3 to 8 and then above 8 as well. So you can use this tool to adjust between rate structure types as well in this manner. That's it for the data input on the rate side. I mean, everything else is all these mirror exactly what I just demonstrated on the sewer side, the irrigation side, and the commercial side as well. Down here, we've got a couple of assumptions to make. Or not assumption, a couple of assumptions, a couple also data points that you need to have, which is what is the total number of accounts that you have under residential water. When we say residential water, we just mean everybody who's being charged these rates right here, how many accounts, how many active accounts are actually being charged, at least the base charge. You would put that number in here. Same thing with the sewer. Commercial water is up here, commercial sewer is down here, and then irrigation. So we need to know what these numbers are. And then the assumption part is, are these numbers growing? Is your community growing? Are you adding new accounts every year? And then you put in a linear growth rate as an assumption here. The tool also looks for tap and impact fees or connection charges, system development charges, whatever you call them. So those one-time fees that you charge a customer when they connect to the system for the first time, you would put in what they are on the sewer side, the water side, the irrigation side, and the model will assume that if you're growing these 1,000 customers at 1% per year, you're going to be charging the $2,000 and the for this water section, you'll be charging the $500 for that extra for those new customers that are coming on board. This last input here is just an assumption on the uncollected bills. Every utility has, it's extremely rare that you collect on 100% of all your bills. Sometimes you just have to write something off as bad debt. So this tool allows you to account for some of that in the revenue and expense calculations. That's it for the revenue side and the rate structure side. On the data input side, data input number 2, where we have expenses. Let's start with the expenses on the right. So I mentioned earlier that this tool will show you the 20 years, and you would put in numbers that you know for certain what you'll be spending in those years in this column down here. So if I know 3 years from now I'm going to be spending $500,000 out of my reserve fund to pay for a capital project directly, then I would put $500,000 in here. If I know what my debt service is, I would put debt service in here directly. That's a lot more accurate than trying to put everything into this box. This section here shows where you would estimate or you would calculate what your existing expenses are, and everything that you put in here is going to be adjusted or inflated linearly at this rate. So this is an input that you would have as well. So things like operating expenses, you might not know them exactly for every single year, so it might be difficult to put everything in here year by year. You might just want to estimate or calculate what they were in this existing year and then assume it's going to grow at 4% or 2% per year. These fields right here are also, you can change them. So you can type in anything that you want. I think there are about 10 different rows. So you can mirror your budget as well. If you have budget line items, it's easy to adjust and to mirror what you've got there. The tool doesn't care where you put the numbers. It's going to just look at the sum of all this and then inflate the total sum with this inflation rate in the analysis. So just breaking it down like this helps you figure out what the numbers are, but does not really affect the model itself. Up here you have the fund balance that's beginning at the beginning of this existing year. We said the existing year is 2014. You put in what the fund balance is beginning of the year. Again, the tool is simplifying assumptions, so it's assuming that you have one fund for the water and sewer. Whether you have an operating fund, a capital fund, a reserve fund, whatever funds you've got, it will assume everything is put into this one big fund balance that it will try to model and make sure that you have enough revenues to meet your expenses and to stay above zero for that fund balance. So what is the total fund balance that you have at the beginning of the fiscal year? And then on the left-hand side is where we have the water use numbers. Again, if you have block rate structures or if you're modeling block rate structures, then we would need to have the water use in each of the blocks that you've specified. In this case, we have 3 blocks. So we would have to go to data input 2 and then put in the 3 numbers here that would correspond to those blocks. And to get these numbers, we're looking for the total volumetric use per month, so the average per month, in all of the customers who are being charged this rate right here. So between 0 and 3, they're being charged 2. All the residential customers in that block, how much, what was the volume that you sold in that block? It's a little tricky to do that, and we do have an example of how to do that. If you click on that hyperlink, it shows you, if you pull up your billing rate, your billing data, and you have, this is account number 1, and this is the street address, this is how much was charged every single month, this is a 12-month history of that fiscal year, this is how much the total volume that was charged in each month. Well, if the first block ends at 3,000 gallons, then if this number exceeds 3,000 gallons, then the maximum you can have here is 3,000. And the next block was between 3,000 and 8,000 gallons. So this number exceeds 8,000, which means that you're charging the full 5,000 gallons, 8,000 minus 3,000, in the second block. And then anything that exceeds 8,000 gallons, is going to be charged in this final block. So that's the 23 minus 8,000. That gives you 15. We have formulas up here that you can look at and mirror in analysis. But essentially, we're breaking down every customer's monthly consumption into how much was charged in block 1, how much was charged in block 2, how much was charged in block 3. If you do that for all your customers, you would sum them up at the end of the for the entire year, and then you would divide it by 12 in order to get the average monthly across the entire system. And then you would copy these numbers, so that 1.5 million gallons per month you would put into this cell right here. This section right here has a couple of assumptions on changes of water use. We know for a fact that customers, there's a long-term trend in the United States where household water use is declining. And that's because households are becoming more efficient, appliances are becoming more efficient, people are irrigating less. So if you know that there's a long-term decline in your customer base, you would put that in here in the first cell. So minus something percent as a decline in the average use. That's in addition to how do customers respond to rate increases. So we're defaulting this to, for every 10% increase in your rates, customers will reduce their average use another 3%. You can change that if you think it's going to be more or less. These are numbers that you can adjust, and we usually go back and forth with the utility about what numbers to assume in this case when we're trying to help them using it. And you can do that with residential, commercial, and irrigation as well. That's it for data inputs. Then you can look at the charts, which are the outputs of the model. So the first chart at the top shows what the projected fund balance is at the end of the year. You don't want to ever be below 0. That's for certain. And you also sometimes have a minimum target. You don't want to have a fund balance that drops below 500,000 or $1 million or an eighth of your annual expenses. Sometimes there's a target level that you've got that you want to make sure that you maintain. If that's the case, then you put it up here in this cell, and by doing that, it will jump up this dotted line, which is your target number, to where your target is, and you can see if your fund balance ever drops below that number. So in this case, in this utility, under the existing rate structure, so by just using this column right here, the existing rates, and not changing the rates, they would have been below that $2 million target every single year and continuously dropping. By raising rates, so under the blue line, this is what happens when they raise rates, they will actually get to their targets, but they're still short down here in the first year, so they would have to go in here and probably increase their rates a little bit more in order to achieve better numbers. Still not enough, you would go back and tweak one more time. And so this is how you would use the model, is to go back and forth to try to adjust your rates and make sure that your projections exceed your, provide whatever revenues you need to make sure that your fund balance meets your target. If you want to ignore the fund balance itself and just look at just the next year, you want to make sure that your revenues coming in will exceed your expenses, regardless of the fact that you are below your fund balance target to begin with, then this chart right here helps you do that. So this is a ratio of your total revenues divided by your total expenses. And you want that ratio to be greater than 1, always greater than 1, if you want your revenues generated in that 1 year to exceed the expenses in that 1 year. Again, ignoring any savings or eating into your savings or building up savings. So in this case, the utility under the old rates would have had more expenses than revenues, but under the rate structure that we just modeled under new rates, they would have more revenues coming in to meet their expenses. You can see these calculations, you can see these actual numbers and how we calculate these numbers using these two worksheets. So this is the fund balance using just the existing rates, and this looks exactly the same, but it's using the new rates instead of the existing rates. And we list everything in all 20 fiscal years here, so you can see the projections. So this is the cash flow model, the number of customers, the consumption, and you can see that the consumption is changing over time because of the average reduction. that we built in. And then you've got the revenues coming in from different line items. Here are the expenses that are being projected as they increase. Here's the annual increase that we've put in step by step. And then it calculates what the net revenues are for that year. The fund balance, the start or the year-end fund balance is here. This is the first one that we begin with. It takes this fund balance, it adds the net revenues, and it provides you the next year's end year fund balance. So as we said, the first under the existing rate, they would have a negative revenue, and they would have eaten into their reserves or into their fund balance, as opposed to if they raise their rates, this is where you will see the rate, the net revenue actually increases, and then they'll be building into their fund balance. I realize that I've kind of gone through this tool relatively quickly, very quickly actually. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them right now. And otherwise, I will switch right now to talking about resources that are available that complement these tools. That some of them you may know of, some of them you may not. AWWA has the M1 manual, which for a lot of utilities is considered to be sort of the Bible of rate structures and rate setting. This is not a free resource. You do have to purchase it. I don't think it's very expensive. It's a pretty thick book that goes into the nuts and bolts of calculating rates and how do you price things out and what sorts of rate structures work well in different scenarios. It's a very good book. M1, they also have the M54 manual and other manuals that they're related to rate setting as well. So AWA's website is a good one to kind of peruse and look for guidebooks. EPA has produced a lot of guidebooks over time that are free for use. They're much simpler than the M1 and the other manuals that AWA put together. And these include some workbooks and worksheets that you can fill in and use yourself. So the one that I have on the right, setting small drinking water system rates, is a very good one for particularly very, very small systems that have never really budgeted for a water system to begin with. We have a lot of resources on our website. Again, everything that we have on our website is free for use and download, and consultants are free to use them just as much as utilities or funding agencies. This is a guidebook that we produced in North Carolina a few years back, but it's actually applicable to any utility, which is a step-by-step guidebook in determining the different types of rate structures and when is it good to have a low base charge versus a high base charge, or when should you have an increasing block versus a uniform rate. Increasing block is not the answer for every utility. A lot of times uniform rates are sufficient and they do just as good a job as block rates. It also provides some information about competing objectives. If you're trying to encourage conservation, but you're also trying to maintain affordability and you're trying to encourage economic development with your rates, how can you design your rate structure in order to accomplish these different objectives? So that's what this tool is, this guidebook is for. As David mentioned, the rate survey that was completed a few months ago in the state of Alabama, we've got hundreds of utilities, hundreds of Alabama utilities included in this rates dashboard, where you could benchmark your rates against other utilities in the state. You can also compare your utilities rates against utilities of the same system size, or utilities in the same river basin, or utilities in the same with the same sort of economic socioeconomic conditions for customers, so the same kind of income level for customers. You can use this tool. It's an interactive tool. It's free to use. It's very good to use when you're not just looking and benchmarking your own rates and also the financial indicators. So we have the operating ratio included as an indicator here, but also when you're presenting to your board. If you think that your rates are very low and your finances are in danger because of that, if your revenues are less than your expenses, this tool will show you that. It will show that your rates are low and that your operating ratio is in the red, and you might have a case for raising rates if necessary. Or vice versa, if the rates are too high and your revenues far exceed your expenses, then you might use this tool to decide that you might need to drop back your rates a little bit. Or use your excess revenue for capital projects, which I'm sure every water system has. A unique feature for this dashboard in Alabama, we know how football crazy the state can be, so what we've got there is a comparison of the water and sewer bill to the a ticket price to an SEC football game as well. So you can in a lot of states we talk about how water rates are lower than cable bills, for example. Well, in the state of Alabama, you can talk about how the water bills are less than going to a SEC football game. We do have other financial tools on our website as well, and we don't have a slide that covers all of them, but here's just a selection of 4. If you just go to our website, efc.sog.unc.edu, go under Resources, Tools, you'll find a lot of these Excel-based tools that you can use for different purposes. We don't want to create a single tool that does everything. We find these to be far too complicated. They take too much time, and they don't do, not everybody uses a tool to do everything. Sometimes utilities just want one tool to do one specific thing. So this rates analysis model does just projections on the cash flow. We have a separate tool on how does the capital improvement plan, how does the capital project affect your rates. So that's actually the webinar that we're doing on the 23rd and 25th is on that 4th tool here. You put in what your capital projects are, and the tool will automatically estimate what your rate increases need to be in the next few years in order to make sure that you have enough funds coming in to pay for your capital projects. We've got other tools as well looking at assessing your revenue risk. So if customers reduce demand, how much revenue will your utility lose because of your rate structure design and because of your customer water use patterns as well. So it's very unique to your utility. And if you subscribe to our blogs before, you'll probably have seen a blog post yesterday, I think, on this specific tool. It's a tool that allows utilities to assess the affordability of their residential rates, and not just looking at percent MHI. We find that percent MHI is problematic for many reasons, but this tool gives you several indicators of affordability. So you put in what your rate structure is and some socioeconomic information from Census Bureau, which we provide instructions on how to do that, and it will show you how affordable your rates are to your customers for your customer base. David mentioned that we have some ability to help small water systems, and a little bit more about that is thanks to the U.S. EPA, where we have the Smart Management for Small Water Systems project. We're on round 2 of that project, where we can assist any water system that serves 10,000 people or fewer on several topics. I'm just showing 4 topics here: asset management, water loss reduction, fiscal planning, rate setting, and energy management. We're doing a lot of workshops, we're doing a lot of trainings, we're doing a lot of webinars, we're creating training modules, we're working with AWWA nationally and with each section in different states on this project. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this in the coming months. But I wanted to point out that because EPA is paying us to do this project, we can provide free direct assistance for small water systems, in-depth assistance on any of these 4 topics I'm listing. So if you've got issues with asset management or rate setting, we can work with you one-on-one as basically as a free consultant to you, and we provide 20, 30 hours worth of work. This would require you to invest some of your own time as well in working with us. So you'd have to go back and get some data. We would schedule some meetings and some phone calls, some presentations if we need to. But there'll be some back and forth, but we'll be basically acting as a de facto consultant to you in some form. If you're interested in doing that, you can sign up for direct assistance on efcnetwork.org/one-on-one, or I believe we have a poll question that David will pull up right now, and you can just indicate right there that you're interested in some of this assistance. While we're pulling this up, I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions about rate setting or about the tool, please feel free to do that. I know that we have one question in queue right now that David will be reading up pretty soon. So please select all that apply. If you need some direct assistance, in-depth direct assistance on any of these issues, please let us know. Setting rates, developing rates. So if you select reviewing and setting rates, we'll probably be starting off using this tool together. And we can help you fill it in using your data and talk about how to use it, how to adjust it, so that your revenues exceed your expenses. Calculating financial ratios, determining affordability of your rates, or setting up a budget can help with any of those. Thank you. And we won't be sharing those results. We'll just we'll take the information with us. Another resource that's available to you is not just our website, but we also have a blog post that provides a lot of information. And we post blogs about once a week or so, and a lot of times it's on water and wastewater. We have information on how construction costs have gone up over time. So what inflation factors you can use when you're calculating construction costs. We have affordability questions answered. We talk about small systems. We talk about large systems. But if you're interested in signing up for this blog post, you can go to efc.web.unc.edu, where I think David will have a poll in just a second. A lot of resources available for small water systems or medium-sized systems that might want to think about things in a smaller system setting. You can go to efcnetwork.org, and that's actually where you would sign up for direct assistance or sign up for any of the workshops that we're doing for small systems as well. You can follow us on Twitter at EFC@UNC. So David will now launch a poll asking if anybody wants to sign up for the blog. If you say yes, we will ask our outreach coordinator to go ahead and sign you up. And like I said, we have a lot of relevant information on water and sewer, and you can always unsubscribe at any time if you're no longer interested. All right. I think that should probably do it. Thank you. All right, so at this time, I'm going to ask if we have any questions to answer.
Shadi, we do have one quick question from the audience. What if I know of other revenues? Does this tool allow for or account for other expenses, fund transfers into or out of the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund? Does it allow for things like tap and impact fee revenues?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to bring that up, and I might have forgotten to do that. So on the tap and impact fees, yes, it will account for that by, in the data input one, you would put in what your fees are, and you sum them up. If you have tap fees or connection fee and you have a system development charge, sum those two up and put them in here. And again, the model will assume that these charges are going to be applied to any of the new customers that you're modeling here. These 1,000 customers, you're growing at 1% per year, so the new customers are going to be charged these fees right there. So that's tap and impact fees section. As far as other revenues, we did this webinar a couple of days ago, and the question came up about transfers as well. So if you're thinking about transfers, I'm not going to get into the politics of when and when not to do transfers, but let's say there are some transfers coming in. Right now, the model only thinks of revenues that come from these rates that we've modeled here and these tap and impact fees. That's it. That's the only source of revenue that you can model into the tool. But you might have some other sources of revenue. And if that's the case, you can sort of cheat the tool a little bit, and it's okay to do that. I always cheat Excel. It's fun to do that. The way to cheat it is to take it out of any of the expenses that you've put in. So let's say that you know that you're getting an average of $50,000 a year from other sources of revenue that you want to count in here. Easy way to do that is to remove it out of either these columns right here, or remove it from one of these line items here. Or you can even, I think you can maybe put in a negative number. No, you can't put a negative number. So we built in some conditional formatting here and some conditions on the cells to prevent you from entering in text when you need to put numbers, or put a negative when you can't have a negative. In this case, you can't put in a negative number, but you can take out that $50,000 from the salaries, and that way you're accounting for that extra revenue that's coming in. And again, just as a reminder, the tool doesn't care what these line items are. It just looks at the total number of expenses, or the total sum of expenses, and it projects them into the future. So if you take out $50,000, it's the same as if you're putting in a $50,000 revenue. While I'm on this page, I also want to point out this line item here, which, again, you can change this to be anything, literally anything. But what I want to point out is that if you don't already have a capital improvement plan, if you don't know what your capital projects are going to cost you, either through debt service or through cash. If it's debt service or cash, you're probably going to be able to put all these numbers into this column here. But if you don't know that, then at the very least, you should be accounting for depreciation when you're thinking about expenses. You don't actually pay depreciation. It doesn't actually come out of your funds. But in order to account for capital projects, which you will no doubt have in the next few years, then at least put depreciation in as an expense if you don't already have it calculated as a capital project in this column. Do it one or the other. You don't need to do both. From our experience, depreciation alone is not enough to pay for capital projects. Capital projects are always more expensive in the future than depreciation depreciation is, because depreciation is looking at previous expenses, past expenses, and it doesn't account for the fact that costs are going up constantly. So at least count for depreciation if you don't already have capital plans or capital projects factored in somewhere else in this model. I think we're actually just right on time, so I'm going to take the initiative and tell David that I think that we're going to stop here, and if there are any other questions, then I'll be happy to answer them by email later on. But thank you all for paying attention to me. I'm going to pass it over to David now.
Thanks very much, Shadi, and thank you everyone for attending today. We want to make sure that all of you know before you go that there is one more topic in the Alabama webinar series, and we are excited about the capital planning and user-friendly capital improvement tool for water and wastewater utilities. You can attend that either on the 23rd or the 25th of September, Tuesday or Thursday. You can register at the link on your screen there. You'll see a screenshot of the CIP tool right there. You can also just navigate in from our top of our website to click on the Alabama link for registering there. And please complete our evaluation. If you have time to do so right now, I'm about to push out to you, and you should see it on your screen any moment now in your chat box there. That's the link to the Qualtrics survey. Shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes to fill that out. If you don't have time to do it right now, you'll be getting that as a link in an email within a day or so. But if you have time to do it right now, we'd really appreciate your input. I just want to say thank you again to my colleague Shadi Eskoff for leading the webinar today, and to our good colleagues at ADEM in Alabama, including Mr. Aubrey White and Mr. Dennis Harrison. Thank you very much for attending our webinar today. Hope to see you in 2 weeks.